whether it's actually, in that space where you become very successful, or it's in, hustling on something else that makes this thing possible. And so that's, you're right. People don't think about that. But again, if you're wired that way, if you're wired to where you have to control your own destiny, you really want to be fulfilled in your work, then you'll do what it takes to do that. Show you, because my email blast and the analytics that come along with that stuff, I can show you the governor reads my email every morning. The Speaker of the House reads my email every morning. This many members of Congress and this many members of the State House and whatever read my email. And so if you are an entity that wants to speak to those people, it's a small audience, but if you want to reach them, they will pay a premium for that. Yeah. And I got very quickly, that was pretty clear. And so that's kind of how I turned it on. And over time, developing other products from, the radio network, which came a little bit later on, and, the different advertising options and doing events. So just looking for different revenue streams to be able to capitalize over this captive audience that I've been able to create that is a high dollar audience, because we're talking the major CEOs of corporations, the major politicians, et cetera. And so that's kind of how it morphed into a business over time.
But how long though, when you start doing this? Because it sounds like you did this in college, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're just doing this in college. So here's the thing that I hear people talk about all the time. So I'm only on my own business for about 6 years now, but you hear people all the time. I heard a quote the other day. It says, no one wants to get rich slow. No one wants to. Right. Everybody wants to make money and make it fast, and that's just not the. It's not the way it is. So tell me the timeline from not from when you sold the business, but like from when you started writing a blog to when you started actually making money to when it was a full-fledged, like, hey, there's a lot of employees and a lot of money going through. What's the timeline on that?
I think 2011, late 2011 is when it launched as my blog. I would say 2013 is when it became a self-sustaining, I make a living doing Yellowhammer.
So 2 years of doing work.
Grinding.
Making no money.
Well, that's right. And so you have to, so I think one of the best ways to become if your goal is to control your own destiny and own your own business, I think one of the best ways to do that is have something that makes money, that's a solid thing, and then grind it out on what you really want to do long term. And that goes against everything you just said about short term, I want to get rich quick kind of thing. That's like the exact opposite.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that's look, people can go out there and get a bunch of debt and start a business and whatever. I'm just not for it. It's just not, yes. I don't do my personal life that way. No. I don't have any debt, and I don't want to have any debt in my business if there's any way to avoid it. Now, granted, there are times when if you're trying to ramp it up and scale quickly, once you get something, you think through some of those things. But on the front end, I just have a hard time. Right. I want to prove that concept first.
Absolutely.
So that's what I did, and I had fortunately we had some money saved up. My wife is a hard worker, and so there was a time when we first got married where she was really sacrificed, working 2 jobs at a time. I was doing whatever. I worked at when I lived in Nashville at one point. We were doing the band thing. We had to have a side job at the mall to be able to make you do what you have to do.
Figure it out.
In those time periods, and I think it's an important kind of the underlying principle here is every overnight success was years in the making.
Years in the making.
And so whether it's actually, in that space where you become very successful, or it's in, hustling on something else that makes this thing possible. Right. And so that's, you're right. People don't think about that. But again, if you're wired that way, if you're wired to where you have to control your own destiny, you really want to be fulfilled in your work, then you'll do what it takes to do that.
See, I didn't think I was wired that way. Like, you and I grew up very similar. It sounds like that middle class, month to month type thought process, where both my parents are educators. Your dad's in the ministry, very, very similar, socioeconomic backgrounds.
Yeah.
From Alabama, lived in Alabama. You've lived all around the South. And so I thought I went to college. The only reason I went to college was to play football and to go coach. That's what my dad did. That's what I wanted to do. And so there's no question about what I wanted to do. But when I felt a calling, and I say a calling, and you've felt this before, a pull, a tug, a whatever by the Lord to get out of what you're doing, when you do that, it is it's something you can't escape. Mm-hmm. And so when I got out of it, I didn't have anything to do. Like, I literally stopped working and didn't have a job lined up. Ended up working, like you said, I worked at a church making half of what I was making, and that's when MilFit started, and that's when, like you said, I went 2 years. Now, we made a little money, but we didn't make any for real money. So I went 2 years of doing both.
Yeah.
My wife walked in like a year and a half into it. She goes, hey, look, you're doing the coaching hours thing again. And I realized that. And so it sounds like really, really similar paths along that.